Let's listen now as the choir sing. Let's all sing in God Welcomes All. Good morning and welcome to worship on a cold day like this. I think we should have had some Zumba to throw in to keep you warm. We are people of the story, words alive within us that move us, challenge us, encourage us, transport us back into the world again. Let's gather within our stories and speak of the wonderful things of God and the world, and the one who welcomes it all. Together, may we find ourselves in the greatest story there is, of the love of God, the love that God has for each one of us. In that story, let's worship, let's sing in Let Us Build a House. thought we'd have a bit of fun to get across some ideas. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Dino's or somewhere like that and watched them make a pizza. Have you? You watch them throw up the dough and like that, and then put on. Scott, if you can imagine a pizza like that, somebody came up with the idea that we could be pizza people. Whether that means we eat pizzas all the time, I'm not very sure, but the idea was that the crust, in other words, the dough that it starts off with, that it's to symbolize the kindness which should be the base for all of us, the kindness that we have, and the honesty to give us a strong, reliable foundation. And then, of course, you've got the red sauce, the tomato sauce with that. And that symbolizes compassion. It's got flavor, it's rich, it's got something that really adds something to the base. And respect, it's the essential ingredient because it binds everything together on the pizza. What do they put on next? Cheese, yes. Yeah. Cheese. Cheese is meant to be humor, that adds a delightful melting charm to life. And it's also apparently meant to symbolize patience. Which is meant to be smooth and comforting with that. And then, of course, after the cheese, what do we have? Toppings, that's right, toppings. And the toppings could be seen as whether it's pepperoni, it could be generosity. If it's mushrooms, it's empathy. If it's jalapenos, and which I can never normally say properly, but I've been practicing. Jalapenos, it's courage, because you've got a spicy kick that goes into it. And then you've got the different coloured bell peppers, which give you a touch of creativity because it's all different colours that go in it. And there's one thing left before you've got a pizza ready to go in the oven. What is it? Well, it could be that, but it's seasonings. Because so by putting a sprinkle of oregano, you could say that you're putting some positivity in there. A dash of basil apparently gives you wisdom, but and a pinch of salt shows that there's loyalty. Thinking of all these different qualities, the next time you get a pizza, or you get the option of eating a pizza, think of all these qualities that are meant to make us up, and let's try and look at ordinary things in life in a different way. Let's bring our prayers together. Loving God, the story is told. The story is lived experience, because the story is in us. Loving God, your word is more than storytelling. It's not just something told about what happened in the past that's meant to get us thinking. It's not meant to merely make us stop and take notice. The story of old of creation, of your Spirit at work, is the work of your being involved in our world today and with all your people today. The story of Jesus is a story of love personified, a love that is never-ending, a love that is life-changing. The story of now is the reality of where we fit into the drama of your love, the gift of your life, and the story of where you meet us, wherever we are, at whatever stage in our lives we are presently at. So let us have ears to listen to your words speaking into our lives. Let us not miss a word that you speak, or a story you offer, or a vision you create, or a song that you sing. Let us not miss any message you teach, any encouragement you give. Loving God, for ears that are blocked to your word, we say sorry. For eyes closed to the beauty of your world, we say sorry. For hearts that are cold towards the hardships that are experienced by others, we're sorry. For hands that remain idle when there's work of love into which we're invited, we ask your forgiveness. In your acceptance, take our shortcomings and do not hold them against us. Help us instead to be grown into a people of faithfulness and genuine discipleship, willing actors in the unfolding story of your world, willing participants in your work of love in that world. And unite our voices in one now in the words that Jesus gave to his friends to share together. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Let's sing again in As a Fire is Meant for Burning. If anybody's been in my study in the Manse, you'll know that I've got one or two books, which my wife reckons is one or two too many, I think, sometimes. But nowadays, it's becoming quite unusual for children to think about getting books and reading books. Yeah, they've got to learn to read, but they'll learn to read far more happily if they go on something like Twitter threads. I think is that the correct word? Facebook posts, Insta reels, or TikTok videos. They go into all of these things, and I always think it's quite amusing to watch not only children but adults as well going on to them and sitting, and they no longer do we talk to people we meet when we're out and about, because their their phones are up and they're out and they're watching something. But these two are telling stories, influencing imaginations, stirring laughter, sometimes can be tear-jerking. It can be telling sad stories too. When Jesus used words, he did the same sort of thing. His words had power to influence, to stir imaginations, to induce laughter, to make tears flow, to shock his listeners. How do we use our words? How do we use our stories? What effect do they have? Are they kind? Are they empathetic? Are they encouraging? Or are they critical, condemning, or maybe even cruel? How do we use our words? The written word allows for many different styles of writing that allows a message to get across to an audience. Take a newspaper, for example. Big headlines grab our attention. And ideally, in a few words, you get an idea of just exactly what's going to be spoken about. Columns are then written, which give the details of the events being reported, and often will include quotes of those who are guilty within or witnesses to the direct circumstances. Opinion pieces are common too, which take a topic and give space for the writer to set before the audience their comments on a subject from their personal point of view, inviting the reader to reflect and hopefully think about their own conclusions. And of course, the fairly up-to-date thing for people to write is, in fact, what? A blog, isn't it? If you write a blog, then you're really you're sort of up to date with that. But one common news style in both written and television news that appeals to me is what's called verified news, where fact-checking takes place and stories are scrutinized and analyzed critically before the story is told. The description gives the reader or the viewer the assurance that what's being reported is nearer the truth than it might otherwise have been. And you might wonder why that's not always the way that they report the news to us. Yes, we probably do get fake news in this country too, don't we? There's sometimes. In that, I would say the Bible was ahead of its time. One of its strengths is the use of varied writing and storytelling styles to broaden the impact of the word and to get different messages out there to people in the best ways possible. Sometimes Jesus told stories which he called parables. And the story invites the reader and the listener to make judgments as to what the story might mean. What it might mean will vary from audience to audience, from circumstance to circumstance. And that's the beauty of a story. It's not one size that fits all. Because stories can be messy and lead us to different interpretations, leaving us to think more rather than tying everything up together in a nice, neat knot very quickly. From the perspective of the Bible, storytelling is a wonderful way to get across God's word about God's love for us and all people that's to be shared and it's got to be grown within us and within other people. But to be effective, you need good stories, and the story needs to be told well. The Bible gives us the material, and today we're going to be thinking a bit about that. Eugene Peterson, who wrote, an American who wrote a version of or translated a version of the Bible which is called The Message, describes Jesus' parable from the boat from which Jesus told his story as a pulpit. Well, I think a moving pulpit would be quite scary for for anybody that did it, but it gives us a sense of the purpose of the story. It was to get people thinking and to encourage reflection on the material in a way that was going to let them grow and let them share their love and understanding with other people. And that's the point of what we share in our churches and in our worship, using different styles, sometimes finding the ideal story format. Share the good news, share the love of God, reach out to other people with that love, encourage them towards a closer relationship with God so that we can advance the work of God in our communities, in our country, in our world. A good story can achieve that. God invites us to present stories, to delve in and see what jumps out by way of a new understanding of the use and abuse of power. Perhaps how we receive the message of God, not missing it, but allowing it to grow and flourish in our lives and to grow and flourish amongst others so that they can feel touched by what's going on. Let's sing again in I Heard the Voice of Jesus Say. Listen now for a word from God as we have a story from the New Testament.
Our reading this morning is from Matthew chapter 13, verses 10 to 17. The message: why tell stories? The disciples came up and asked, "Why do you tell stories?" He replied, "You've been given insight into God's kingdom. You know how it works. Not everyone has this gift, this insight. It hasn't been given to them. Whenever someone has a ready heart for this, the insights and understandings flow freely. But if there is no readiness, any trace of receptivity soon disappears. That's why I tell stories, to create readiness, to nudge the people towards a welcome awakening. In their present state, they can stare till doomsday and not see it, listen till they're blue in the face and not get it. I don't want Isaiah's forecast repeated all over again. Your eyes are open, but you don't hear a thing. Your eyes are awake, but you don't see a thing. The people are stupid. They stick their fingers in their ears so as they won't listen. They screw their eyes shut so they won't have to look, so they won't have to deal with me face to face and let me heal them. But you have God-blessed ears and eyes, eyes that see, and God-blessed ears, ears that hear. A lot of people, prophets and humble believers among them, would have given anything to see what you are seeing and to hear what you are hearing, but never had the chance.
Thank you, Wilwood. Let's sing now in We Have a Gospel to Proclaim. Having had a reading from Matthew, I'm now going to talk a bit about a story from Luke. And that's a deliberate choice. It's not that I've got mixed up as far as it's concerned. I wonder if you've ever noticed that Luke in his gospel has told us several times in the early chapters about Jesus' growing reputation as a teacher, as a storyteller. He doesn't tell us anything about what his stories actually were about, but he says that all the people liked them. There are no hints as to the topics and what Jesus was preaching on. All there is an acknowledgement of how well the efforts were going down with the people who heard him, whether in the towns and the villages around Nazareth, or whether on the shores of Lake Gennesaret, where once again the gospel writer tells us about crowds flocking to hear Jesus. So why isn't Luke prepared to share some insight into what Jesus was telling a story about? Why isn't he telling us what he means? It could be because Luke wasn't yet part of the disciples group. He's only later, it was after Jesus' death, that he became one of the apostles and one of the gospel writers. So these, for him, are stories before his time. Somebody else has told him about the impact that they had, but not the content of what they had. But those who know about these things see Luke doing some fishing himself. They see him aiming to lure his readers in. He wants to tantalize us with stories of how popular what Jesus was, so that we ask ourselves, what did Jesus talk about? Luke puts the way he does to pique our interest in Jesus' stories, to keep us reading. He's looking to make us want to know more about the man that everyone was talking about at that time. The man all sorts of people were praising because of the things he said and the hearts that he touched with the stories that he told, and because of the miraculous things that he did. He wants us to catch a glimpse of the authority with which Jesus spoke, and to grasp to how charismatic Jesus was. These things combined were what enabled God to do what he did through Jesus. So Jesus preaches from the shore, and then, because the shore is too crowded, from the boat. And then, with all the eyes of the crowd still on him, he turns his attention to the emptiness of the boat. No fish meant no income for those dependent on the haul to pay bills and to provide food to eat. Just as an aside, but an important one, all the other gospel writers are pretty scant on detail when it comes to Jesus calling his disciples. They simply they have Jesus saying to the disciples, or the ones that he would like to be his disciples, "Come and follow me." And immediately the fishermen left their nets and followed him, or left their money desks and followed him. With Luke, that call comes only after Jesus has healed Simon's mother-in-law, and only after Simon and his brother Andrew and two other brothers, James and John, who were Simon and Andrew's fishing partners. Jesus' call comes only after that healing, And after they've all heard Jesus preach, both in the synagogue and from the boat on the seashore, which means that Jesus wasn't a stranger to the two sets of brothers. He wasn't just somebody who turned up when they were fishing. They had no clue who he was. They'd heard him before. They'd heard what he said. They heard something of his content before. And that's probably one of the reasons they were prepared to let him use their fishing boat. Why does any of that matter, you might ask? Well, it means that each of these men had experience of Jesus, but it was only when Jesus quite literally stepped into their ordinary, everyday world that the four men felt compelled to follow Jesus, to listen to Jesus. First of all, they had to trust him. With all those eyes on them, Simon and his friends had to find the courage to follow Jesus, even although every bone in their body was probably screaming, "But we've fished all night long. There's nothing there. It's the wrong time of day. It's the wrong place to fish." Having dared to listen to Jesus, what came up was more fish than they'd ever seen before, enough to sink both boats, enough to keep their families going for months. For Simon, it was a moment that brought him to his knees, not with a "wow, you're amazing," but with "go away." Because at that point, Simon's suddenly overwhelmed by a sense of how small he is, about how little he knows, about how useless he feels in the face of Jesus. And what Simon is saying to Jesus is, "Look, don't waste your time on me, Jesus. I've nothing to offer. Look elsewhere. I don't feel any good." And it's in that very moment when Simon and the others are all supremely aware of what they can't do. It's in that very moment that Jesus asked the four to become his disciples. You don't have to pass exams. You don't have to have the qualifications already to be Jesus' disciples. An awareness of what you can't do is enough. And that should make the hairs on our head, if you've got hairs on your head, or the hairs in the back of your neck perhaps, they stand up. Jesus calls the four not because they have the right skill set, not because they're great believers or good at communicating, not because they know their Bible, not because they know how to pray, because they don't. Jesus calls them because he sees that he can work with them and through them. "Come," Jesus said to the four flawed fishermen, "follow me, and I'll give you people to catch." And the four left their nets and followed him. And some people at this point will point to how brave Andrew, Simon, James, and John were. And they were, but really I think what Luke is trying to say is not as much how brave they were, but how much more courageous Jesus was. He was prepared to take a risk on them. He was prepared to put his faith in very ordinary, nothing special folk. And I think that's a feature of Jesus' DNA, to use a modern term. He does exactly the same right now with us, with you and with me. He calls us to follow him, not because of what we can do, but because of what he would love to be able to do with and through us. Like Simon, most of us might feel at times, at least, that we've nothing to offer. But to Jesus, that's enough. And sometimes that's everything. Dare we believe that? Let's sing now in God of all the Nations. It's a hymn that was written by an American, modern American writer. The intimations are in your hands. Teas and coffees are after the service, and somebody has handed in some very generously handed in some food for today. So if you don't go and eat it afterwards with the tea and coffee, you'll get a doggy bag home with you. But you're welcome to do that. Then the men's breakfast is on the 22nd of February. Hugh and Friends, the concert there, tickets are available. And then under number 6, we're looking to provide a rota of people. We are not giving Scott and Michael their P45s. we're very appreciative of what they do in the sound corner. But if anybody else would like to have a go on our rota, then please will you speak to Margaret. Then just to say that we'll be away on holiday from next weekend, so for just for a week, so if there are any requests for urgent pastoral care over that period, just as I'm covering for St Leonard's this week, Brian Henry is covering for Castle Hill the week that we're that we're away. So from the 14th to the 21st, if you have any pastoral requests, or if you hear of any, then please direct them to Brian Henry for that. And I think that's other than that, just to remind you that we have the DVD showing tonight at 6:30, and everybody's welcome to come along. Can we extend the hand of friendship and welcome to all those round about us?
I do. Yes, I do.
Let's sing again in My Life Flows On in Endless Song. Let's bring our prayers for other people. Loving God, it is your desire that we listen and understand, that we absorb the true condition of your world and its people, that we don't turn a blind eye to the plight that is everyday reality for so many. Help us to look outwardly away from our own concerns and understand what we see not only with our heads, but also with our hearts. Let us be troubled by what we see that is not right in the world. Move us enough not to settle for the way things are, but instead to be inspired to work to make this a better, fairer life for all. In our world, there are rich and poor. There are happy, fulfilled people. There are sad, despairing people. The way the world works, too often those who have are given more, and those who have less continue to lose their little. The gap seems ever to grow wider. It's easy to cast aspersions on others, heaping the blame for that on them. We can blame systems or governments, political leaders, other individuals, anybody else but us. We can admit this isn't fair, but we're not ready to admit that sometimes we are to blame. Or perhaps to recognize that we could do more to speed up change that's offered in the stories of your love. Today, let us take notice of what's going on around us, even if it's only in our part of the world. And let us be fit for doing something about it if something needs to be changed. Today, none of us can be ignorant of how hard life is for some people in our corner of Scotland. As we reflect on topics covered on the television, in social media, and printed press this week, hear us as we take a moment to bring to mind those people for whom we have an individual concern placed in our hearts at this moment. As you already care for them, so show us how we might bring change in their lives by our care. Loving God, hear our prayers, spoken and silent. And in your unfailing love for all, we pray that all will be led to the comfort they need. And those like us who have the capacity for loving our neighbours in some way, however small, will be inspired to do so, that we might reach out the hand of friendship somewhere this week. So be it. Amen. Let's sing now in God of Freedom, God of Justice. Go with and in the love of God. Go with God's heart for all people, and in God's strength feel called by God. And go, and may we do our best to walk in Jesus' footsteps, assured that Jesus can use even us to share the love and the hope that Jesus came to bring. And the blessing of God, Creator, Companion, and Comforter, be with us this day and always. So, now go in peace.